Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining today. And thanks to those that are continuing to answer this little question to get us started today on Slido. Now, there are several right answers in this scenario, and one that Tony and I might challenge today. If you think that price is the most important factor impacting revenue, you would immediately offer those tickets back to sale for the highest price you can get through the box office. And what we've learned, arguably, is that might possibly be a lost opportunity beyond the ticket sale.
And of course, opportunities are what we can't afford to lose right now. Those two tickets could have gained you much more than an additional slice of revenue for that one show. In fact, all of the tickets can. And that's why dynamic pricing is not enough. And that's why we're digging into that with you today in the deeper dive. We're very glad you're here. Thanks for joining us. My name's Tony Folwell, and I'm joined by Stephen Skripek. And today we're joining you from London, England, but it's great to welcome everyone from wherever you are around the world.
Yes, indeed. Good morning, good afternoon, and we're coming into good evening here. Thank you, Tony. Thank you all for joining today. It's good to be back with you. Welcome to those especially that have joined us before from TRG 30 and our other deeper dive webinars. We're so grateful that you've taken the time. We are recording today's webinar so you can watch again and access the slides. And please do engage with us in the chat feature. And if you've got questions, use the Q&A button on Zoom too. Let's use all of Zoom's functionality, even an emoji if you feel like it. First of all, before we start, I want to acknowledge how challenging and tiring things are right now. And you've chosen to take 45 minutes out of your day to spend time with us. Thank you. So if anything for today, enjoy this time you're taking for you, switch off your distractions. We're so grateful you chose to carve some time out to be with us. The other thing I'd just say here is at the outset, I'll acknowledge that we're speaking mostly directly to venues selling reserved seating today, but the concepts we cover are still highly relevant for museums and other non-seating models.
So let's begin by taking stock of our present reality. Right now, as a sector, both our revenues and our units are still significantly down on pre-pandemic levels. This data from our international benchmark is a North American 12-month comparison from September 2021 through to August 2022. Revenue has been cut by a quarter and units by nearly a third compared to the same period in 2018-2019. When comparing the most recent 6 months, though, of each of those periods, we do see the gap is closing, but units are not recovering as quickly as revenue, and we're looking at the challenging fall or autumn with the current inflationary realities affecting our cost of living. And for our UK participants, this data looks much the same here. And do look out for our next Insight report, which will analyse that more closely. So, some improvements in revenue, but at TRG, we look at units as the measure of demand, and it's demand that drives price, not the other way around. So is price causing this gap? Well, here's a quick way to check. Do you still have tickets available to sell at your lowest price point? We're still seeing with some consistency that entry-level price revenue inventory is going unsold and frequently.
To illustrate, imagine for a moment if every ticket to every one of your shows were free. I wonder if you'd have a full house every night. We've all said that we can't even give them away, right, in a low demand situation. But also, I acknowledge that price resistance is a thing. But if you look at your ongoing sales data and you see that you still, as Tony says, have inventory at your lowest price points, we'd argue your problem isn't pricing at all, it's demand. And right now, there just aren't enough people aware, able, interested, or willing to come to some of our low demand events. And folks, this demand thing is a challenge right now. The data is showing it. We're hearing it from you directly. COVID recovery and concerns combined with cost of living challenges and the new ways we're living our lives and choosing to spend our time are still making an impact on demand. So let's put price to one side for a moment and talk about demand. How can we continue to rebuild it? And why do we still need to strategically focus on it as we continue our sector's recovery and rebuilding? Our demand is powerful. It changes behavior. Demand is also different for every one of you joining this webinar today. It doesn't have to mean a sellout or empty theatre or gallery, but rather a clear pace of sales that is different to your typical. If we're ahead of pace, we're in demand. If we're behind pace, we might have a demand challenge. Creating a perception of demand is how at TRG we encourage audiences to book early for the seats they desire and help us incentivize an increase in the recency and frequency of their visits. To do that, we must create a sense of urgency, or what we call a hot ticket. And yes, even with suppressed demand, we can still help create that perception. We don't have to be at 99% capacity to look sold out. Now, the same way that you react to market conditions every day, your existing and new audiences react to your actions. And sometimes their responses aren't as predictable as you'd expect. They're certainly not right now. And often we are creating behavior that affects demand. If your audiences are waiting for your late discounts or booking the lowest price seat, knowing they'll likely be able to find a better empty seat when they arrive, we're compounding the problem and encouraging behavior that's not going to be sustainable for our organizations in the long term. Now, I mentioned recency and frequency. I want to take a moment to talk about that a little bit more. This matters because not all your patrons represent equal value to your organization. This database example that we're going to share now is an example from a UK client. And we found for them that each household participating in their membership program was worth 3.8 that of a regular ticket buying household. And the reason for this is that household, not only had they purchased the membership, but they were also visiting more recently and coming back more frequently. So recency first, how long has it been since a patron has been to your venue? Now, TRG data shows that 75% of new buyers never come back at all. So there isn't even another recent transaction in the database for them at all. I wonder how long it's been for the other 25%. And for your database right now, post-COVID, what proportion of your database has not attended since the pandemic? And then frequency, how often do your patrons attend? 80% of regular ticket buyers visit less than one time per year, Your databases are likely full of ticket buyers who've not been back for over 12 months, maybe 2 years from the pandemic. And then finally, the monetary impact here, the impact of recency and frequency. It's expensive to keep attracting new audiences all the time. In fact, it's 3 times more expensive than retaining your current bookers. But we want to continue and need to continue growing new audiences. That's going to require ongoing investment. So as we continue to attract new audiences, we must also retain our current too. There's an imperative financial reason to do that. Recency and frequency are a great way to measure your success of retention, and managing and creating a perception of demand is a really great way of incentivizing that too. So let's come back to a moment about the suppressed demand we're all experiencing. This article from the New York Times highlighted TRG's data findings that some of the major factors impacting our demand are lingering unease about COVID, an aging demographic, and perhaps most especially changing habits around attending live events. In other words, the gravitational pull of our couches and sofas are now the biggest competitor of our industry. I love that word is different. And that's without laying in the cost of living challenges we are all experiencing. And there's data to demonstrate this. This data shared by Colleen Dylan-Schneider shows the percentage of people, this is in North America, that are increasingly preferring to stay home on weekends. The orange line is the North American aggregate, and that's up 42% from 2011. The blue line underneath are people who are high propensity arts visitors. Their habits are forming around the couch at an even more alarming rate, up over 60% since 2011. So let's think about those folks that we're desiring to attract with new programming, new marketing tactics, and more accessible, equitable practices. Those new audiences are getting even harder to acquire. It's more expensive to acquire them. We're looking thus at a higher cost of sale because of that, and even less results. While at the same time, even our most likely audiences are simply going out less. In fact, I was speaking to a chief executive just this morning. They had a big survey in their city, and the top reason, I just fell out of habit. That's why I'm not coming. We need to generate more demand and understand the factors that impact it.
Beyond COVID, the couch, and changing audience habits, there are factors that impact demand perpetually, regardless of the externalities. So let's get into those and go those on the table right now. Seasonality. Certain times of the year can be easier or harder to attract certain patron types. So, for example, family programming is probably going to have higher demand in the summertime when schools are on break. Time of performance. Time of the event can also impact demand. An afternoon matinee might have less demand than a primetime evening event. It's obvious. Seating inventory. Some patrons prefer a specific area for seating, or there may be limitations in design and layout of your venue, and that can be a demand factor too. Programming. Programming is perhaps the biggest factor impacting demand, of course. Blockbuster programs that are widely known and highly regarded help market themselves and have an immediately higher demand than new or niche programming in general. Day of the week. Day of the week is, of course, no less important than time or season. Weekends are still the most common days off in the most industries, and therefore, weekends often produce the highest demand. Loyalty. Loyalty may be the single most important factor for staying resilient, even in low demand environments. If your patrons are invested in your organization, it provides a stable floor of demand, and without it, every show is a real uphill push to fill the house. Perceived demand. Finally, perception of demand is one we'll talk about much more later on. Sitting in a sparsely attended theatre or being given free tickets does not contribute to positive feelings about the value of the event. And when audiences perceive that a show is popular, on the other hand, or that it's selling out quickly, it creates urgency around purchasing. This brings us back to creating the hot ticket that Stephen referred to. Imagine you're buying tickets online to a show and the screen tells you you're queuing with a number and an estimated wait time. Suddenly, there's doubt in your mind that you'll be able to get that ticket or enough connected seats for others in your party. So you immediately feel a sense that you better book as soon as you can. This is the digital equivalent of seeing a long queue outside the box office window. You see the value in the attraction because it clearly has demand. We don't advocate trickery to broadcast a false demand, but building the perception of demand by demonstrating your true demand is more correlated to your revenue than is price. When the focus is solely on price, especially when demand is weak, the reaction we commonly see is often deep discounting and late or slow or low marketing investments being made. And we're now seeing this amplified more than ever at this difficult time. Last-minute advertising and resorting to fire sales weakens your message. It undermines your existing relationship with patrons, and it solidifies bad habits for your buyers. They'll continue to book last minute, waiting for discount offers, or simply not come because, well, it doesn't look like the happening thing to do if you have to give it away. Suddenly, the couch seems even more appealing. I don't want to discount the huge pressures we're all under right now, but we've got to think about the impact our actions are having for the longer term and the optics of this in your marketplace, where we're all seeking to attract new and different audiences to our venues. We don't need a fire sale. We need a strategy for managing demand.
So let's dig into that strategy. Every demand strategy should address three key factors. First, we've talked about this perception of success. Your scale of house and the order of which you sell tickets and what price and where can be optimized so that you have the perception of success and a full-looking house for all of your events, even in low demand. And also a perception of success scale plan that increases revenue. Next is managing inventory. This is all about how you use each ticket sale to accomplish three seemingly contradictory goals. Maximizing revenues, yes, developing relationships, and building better equitable access. And then dynamic pricing. Yes, it does play a role, but too often dynamic pricing is only one part of a demand strategy and just one leg of the stool. So if you're not managing all three, your demand strategy will wobble. So let's talk about that first element, perception of success. Our goal here is to develop a positive perception of success in any demand environment. This starts with point of sale, but matters through the performance as well. Sitting in a theatre with mostly empty seats doesn't give anyone the confidence right now that their money was well spent on whatever they're about to see, and their value perception declines before the lights go down and the curtain rises. So I'm going to share an example with you, and this example is what we would call a traditional scale plan. It's a large venue example, but the concepts are applicable to small venues too. So in this hall, imagine with this scale of house plan, the different colors that you can see on the screen, that the highest prices are up front and the lowest prices are at the very top rear corners of the house. The price levels are drawn across the entire venue from left to right, side to side. Imagine how this scale plan will fill. This will naturally scatter the audience throughout the entire hall and keep them in groups based on the price that they're willing to pay. Think about what this type of scale plan is saying to your audiences. For example, we often see school groups who are price sensitive, relegated to the back corners of the house. Is that a good first experience to offer young people who are likely attending for the first time? Just one example of new people that we're attracting for the future. What does your scale plan today say about access, what your organization values, and also perception of success? Here is how that house fills. I'm sure you can imagine it. We use heat maps at TRG, which we use to track fill patterns. You can look at this with your own seating plans today. The darker the color, the more that seat was occupied. The white seats are unsold. So think about all these empty seats, especially in those highly visible areas down front. Someone seated in the back or the balcony will see those empty seats and maybe question their purchase before even beginning. There's not a perception of success here. The center aisles and center section of the auditorium are all in demand. And we do have heat in every price level, but can clearly see where people are sitting in different price bands. And low price inventory located in the top tier is not helping with perception of success, and it's not sold out. It's clear we need a range of prices, but do we need as many that are offered? And are they in the most optimized place in the house? Based on sales data and heat maps, we developed this new scale. Price options were simplified down to 5 price points. Lower prices were offered in those hard to fill areas. So we're moving essentially folks that were purchasing that low price point from the backside sections of the auditorium into unsold areas downstairs. And the remaining price zones were drawn by demand. Those center and aisles are the highest, and price decreases horizontally then to fill each section down front. And that top section are actually the highest prices, because if there's that level of demand, they will sell at the higher price. And that's even without any dynamic pricing practices. So here's the results. With the improved plan, the venue filled front to back, side to side. So a person sitting in the last row sees filled seats in front of them. Look how great the house looks. And imagine how then you might incentivize folks by giving season ticket holders or members pre-sale opportunities or specific seats for a specific segment of your database. How might you utilize a new scale plan like this with a great perception of success also to leverage recency and frequency? Okay, there's a second impact to this, Tony, right? Revenue too.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Revenue is the other impact. This is a simplified diagram to illustrate what we often see with traditional scale of house plans and pricing strategies. When a performance goes on sale, you have an average ticket price or per cap. As demand increases, that per cap goes up. However, by the day of the show or the end of the run, the per cap goes down because it's the lower priced inventory that's left to sell or discounts have been applied. And here's what we want to see. This is what ideal scale inventory management can accomplish. We go on sale with all price levels, using low price to satisfy those who are price sensitive and to fill highly visible but hard to fill areas. As demand increases, the inventory that is released is at a higher price level. By the day of the show or the end of the run, per caps are naturally higher. Take a look at the data of your per cap revenue through the sales cycle. What does yours do? If it looks like this, then great. If not, you might want to take a look at your scale plan and whether it's working in the right way for you. The second element of your demand management strategy should be inventory management. When do we open which seats for sale when? And what's the most prudent thing to do with opportunities like the scenario we gave at the beginning? Managing your inventory is the most active step in this process. It means reviewing and proactively controlling available seats for each performance currently on sale, holding and releasing as needed. When it comes to inventory management, timing is everything. Information that informs decisions about when to release seats at what price includes how frequently are we selling at what capacities, how much inventory should be opened at the on sale, how many seats should we offer and at what prices, and at what point in the sales cycle are we? How do we hold and release inventory so that we ensure the house fills from front to back and side to side? How do we ensure that our ticket per caps continue to rise with demand? And what relationships are we looking to seek, honor, and manage? Data and experience can help with all of that. Here's what our inventory management would look like to achieve that. Notice that all prices are available. Based on data analysis, we built this so that there's enough inventory at each price point to cover initial sales in the lowest demand situation. Release 1 brings in more seats at all price points across the venue. In release 2, you can see the natural progression as we release more with growing demand. In release 3, the lowest priced inventory has been exhausted. From this point, we will continue to release back. And because we're only doing so in high demand, we've scaled these seats at top price points to ensure we're maximizing our revenue in demand. And all this without dynamic pricing. Right now, even without changing your scale plan, you could help improve perception of success by reducing the number of seats available to sell and ensuring the most visible parts of the house are filling. It can make a low demand performance look and feel better for both the audience and the performance. But you'll want to be mindful you still have a choice of price available, so that might mean moving some price points around, for instance. Data can help you here.
And Jennifer's asked a question just to this point, Tony, is it feasible to make scale of full changes after tickets have already been on sale? And yes, Jennifer, you can. We'd advocate not a whole broad brushstroke change because that might have a negative impact, but certainly there are tweaks and adjustments that you can make just in the way that Tony's recommended here. If you're in particular low demand and you might want to close down seats in the auditorium and move some of that lower priced inventory down to help fill areas of the house, then yes, absolutely would recommend doing that. But there are data points you'd want to look at alongside that to make sure that price will help fill those seats, and also to ensure that your per capita revenue is not detrimentally impacted by that. So that choice of price is important too, because we're also managing accessibility here. Every ticket is also an opportunity to make good on your equity values. There are real obstacles for people to access your events, whether price, the methods available for buying tickets, transportation to the venue and parking, and the seats themselves. Not everyone is able to be included if you only have one standard operating procedure and never considered unique needs. Let's not forget you have every reason to make access easy for your audiences. You're competing for their attention against that comfy couch and the cost of living pressures. There are strategic questions unique to each venue. Does the program create demand in different areas of the venue? Do you need additional entry price inventory at every release level? Who is buying what price of seats? This is a complex issue and deserves its own space for discussion, but you'll need to think through your own unique obstacles and how to make accessibility and equity a reality with those revenue tensions that we have right now. But we have got a first step framework here to help you. A great place that I tend to start with clients is to list the existing and desired relationships your organization has and continue the inventory requirements for stewarding those relationships. So for example, do you need to hold some specific seats from sales for members or donors? Will you upgrade them to seats closer to the front if you have returns? Are specific seats in multiple price points required for captioned or signed performances? Having a clear understanding of the different strategic relationships and needs will help get you aligned on what's required, especially if as marketing or box office teams, we're being asked from our leadership to prioritize certain relationships. This is a great question to ask. What are the inventory requirements for that new relationship? There is no one size fits all need for your audience. And reflecting on the scenario we asked at the top, the only questionable answer perhaps is to put those tickets straight back on sale, because that is valuing revenue over relationship. Fine if that's the only goal, but remember, long-term relationships help us be more sustainable. All of the other options are valid strategies for encouraging or rewarding loyalty. If you focus on revenue only at the expense of a relationship, eventually you'll have neither. If you value relationship first, the revenue will follow. Okay, after your scale plan and inventory management, then you can finally start to think about dynamic pricing. More often than not, what we see and what I've learned is that pricing decisions are almost always made emotively, or at best with educated guessing based on historical data, and also competitor pricing elsewhere in your marketplace. These factors help, but your inventory and your time to sell it are limited. So we need to use data in the right way to approach pricing. We need revenue. That's a given. But we also need new and existing relationships. And every seat in your house is an asset that needs to be strategically leveraged at every performance to get you the revenue and relationship goals that you desire to achieve, which leads us to the issue of pricing. What is the value of a seat? The truth is, it's worth what you can get for it, no more and no less. And sometimes, despite all the best planning, demand takes us by surprise. It certainly is right now. And the good news is we all have plenty of data to know when that's the case. We can leverage dynamic pricing to gain incremental revenue in high demand situations, or sometimes it can help us stimulate demand where we see clear price resistance. But remember, if your lowest price seats are still available, it's unlikely price is your issue. Now, we'd advocate adding in dynamic price bumps to your optimized scale plan and inventory management. Remember, this is a three-legged stool. Those first 2 points are important first. Your per capita revenue, your average ticket price might look something like this through the sales cycle instead. Where you have increased demand, we'd want to monitor and react to data to understand the level of demand, the pace of sale, and also the marketing investment required to continue to sell tickets. Just because something's in demand, it doesn't mean that we can pull back the lever of investment. There are still events in high demand right now, despite the depressed overall demand we saw in the data at the beginning of this webinar. And so dynamic pricing can still have a role to play where the perception of the value of your event is higher than the price points you might be offering. If you don't have software to automate this for you, you can experiment with incremental price increases to see how it affects demand. Remember, though, at base level, a well-executed scale and inventory management system will increase revenue naturally, and dynamic pricing is the icing on the cake. Okay, I want to acknowledge something. Dynamic pricing is getting a lot of attention right now, and more often than not, negative attention, because negative stories get folks to click on things, right? This week, there was a BBC article that criticized the way a selection of concerts was selling tickets for high-demand artists. When there are more people wanting to come to a show or concert than there are seats, the prices can become, to some, prohibitively expensive. But as we've discussed, there are revenue realities. Much like the inventory requirements for our relationships, there are communication realities too, especially where we might want to introduce or grow our dynamic pricing tactics. And more often than not, except for these big stories, we're not talking about massive price changes like the ones that were reported in this story, just incremental adjustments that can add some icing on the cake to your strategy. And with the right communication, we can give confidence to ticket buyers in the sales process that don't alienate the relationships along the way. Remember, top price is often almost always what gets focused on in online commentaries, but communicating the entry-level price, the ones that are often going unsold, can be a positive message to communicate. For example, you could advertise orchestra seats starting at $20 or 5,000 tickets at £18 this season. It all comes back to that list of existing and desired relationships and their inventory needs. Why not also think about the communication requirements for this and how you honor and reward those relationships through price too?
As marketers, we don't control what's on our stages or our audience's taste, but we can react to demand and know that our strategy is working to its best for revenue and relationships. It's a cycle. You set a price and the audience reacts, and you continue to test and refine. The point of dynamic pricing is to match pricing with demand and value. Data is going to be your friend to help you make decisions. Dynamic pricing does not mean dispensing with entry-level pricing. It means having inventory at all pricing levels and raising or lowering based on demand. To review then, a successful demand strategy is using your seating purposefully and strategically to achieve your goals for building audiences, to create the most inclusive environment you can, and to have a positive perception of success at every show. At TRG, we always will point you towards data to understand your buyer behavior. Where do you have high demand and where don't you? Where are people choosing to sit right now? What price points are folks buying and how is that contributing or not to perception of success? Understanding these trends allows you to conclude the right balance of prices and inventory for shows that are in high demand or in low demand and everything in between. And most important, it'll help us continue to navigate our recovery by communicating to our audiences confidently that we are successful in our marketplaces.
Okay, there's a lot of information there, but there's still time to submit questions. You can use the Q&A button on the Zoom control panel to submit questions directly to us right now. And also, as you leave today's webinar in about 10 minutes' time, a question will pop up on the screen. We'd love you to just take 30 seconds to answer that, just to give us feedback on your experience today. We'd also love to invite you to schedule a call with us to discuss the unique needs at your organization. You can scan this barcode for a quick and easy way to link you up with somebody in your part of the world. And we offer a sprint directly designed for demand management and pricing that creates a plan for your organization based on the concepts we shared today. Okay, let's take a look at those questions. And Cassandra, I saw you popped one in there just towards the end, going back to inventory release planning. How do you recommend managing inventory release when you have same seat subscribers seated all around your venue in all price sections as your first ticket sale for the event? Now, I know we've got a global audience on here today. Subscription, and the subscription that Cassandra is referring to here is fixed seat subscription, where somebody pays a specific price point for the same seat across a selection of shows. And Cassandra, the way I'd approach this actually is to come back to that relationships list and the inventory requirements for that. Often when we are looking at rescaling or making adjustments to a demand strategy for an organization with a subscriber load in, we actually look at the scale plan around those subscribers, right? Because they are relationships we want to honor and reward and acknowledge. However, sometimes subscribers are seated in sections of the house that does not help with our perception of success. So there is a communication plan that will need to be put into place to invite and incentivize those folks to move into a place in the house that would help improve that perception of success. Often they're tied to a specific area by price. And so inviting them to upgrade to a better seat with price is a good way of encouraging and incentivizing those folks to move seats. So thank you for that question, Cassandra, appreciate it. Gregory, if we wanted to create our own heat map, I love that. Any tips on creating a heat map, how to weigh speed of sale and how many times a seat has sold historically? Now, I can't give away all of TRG's algorithms, but what I can say is that depending on what ticketing system you're on, there is a way to export that ticket purchasing behavior and map that onto something like an Excel plan or something that will enable you to look at that. And yeah, I would encourage you to look at the data in some of the ways that you've suggested. Certainly, there is speed of sale by different price points that you might wish to look at. There's also percentage of inventory at each price point that you might want to look at, and along with, in fact, which seats are most frequently sat in and when. Sometimes also looking at the price asked versus the price paid can provide an interesting look at the data there too. So, Gregor, I'd encourage you to reach out to your ticketing provider or TRG, and we can look at a heat map for you and with you there and make recommendations. Cassandra, I love that you've asked another question. Thank you for engaging here. What do you recommend when your lower access price points sell out, but your higher price zones are selling but lagging? Do you rescale more seats to lower prices or lower the higher price points? Really great question. And we don't see this happen too often, actually. But in this situation, it sounds like that your buyers are telling you what they're willing to pay for a price of a seat for this particular event. There's data that I'd want to dig into here with you to understand what's going on here, but I might certainly test to see if there are more seats at perhaps a price point a little higher than the lowest price point to see if they sell there. I wouldn't want you to do out of revenue by just scaling them at the lowest price point, but would they sell, say, for $5 or $10 or pounds more if you rescaled in that area? And testing and refining, testing and reacting to see whether it stems or encourages sales in that area could be a way to test that. But remember to think about where they're scaled and how that acknowledges and rewards existing relationships. The last point I'd say here, and we see this often, especially at the moment, asking folks to lower top prices down. If you're selling some tickets at that price and you remove them all, you're again doing yourselves out of some revenue. So you might want to reduce that price scale to continue to manage perception of success. But again, data is going to be your friend here to understand which price points are selling at which pace. So thank you for that question too. That looks like all of the questions you have for us today. I want to thank you again for joining. There we go, one more. You may have missed an answer, but going back to survey at the beginning, what do you recommend doing with tickets that are turned back? Should they go back on sale at full price or be given strategically to patrons? What a great way to end, actually, to come right back to the beginning. Yes, every time you have, particularly in a high demand situation, good seats available and returned is an opportunity to honor and reward and acknowledge a relationship. Because if we just sell those seats back on sale at full price and someone phones on the day of a performance for a high demand show and gets the 2 very best seats in the house, that's kind of telling them they don't need to book early, they don't need to go on your database to visit your venue. I can just phone up and get tickets on the day. We want people to be able to do that, but we also want to encourage and incentivize them to buy early. So I would, in that situation, find perhaps my most loyal patron or a relationship in the house that I want to acknowledge, invite them to upgrade those seats, and then sell the 2 release seats at that highest price point so you can get the revenue and also acknowledge the relationship in the process. Great question. Thank you very much. Okay, folks, please do give us a little survey response at the end of this webinar today. Tony and I really appreciate you being with us from a rainy, wet London today. I hope wherever you are, it's nicer weather. The autumn, fall has well and truly come back into play here. We'll speak to you soon. Keep a lookout for other deeper dive webinars, and you're always welcome to contact us on LinkedIn, email, carrier pigeon, whatever's best for you. Thank you. Take care.